turns out that we would have to break our previous assumptions when we built the model. In order for a society to achieve economic growth, which would be represented as a rightward shift of the production possibilities curve, we would have to either have an increase in the quantity of resources, an increase in the quality of resources, or technological advances. So, before I give you the answer, which one of these is most important? In other words, in the real world, which actually drives economic growth? Which one is by far the more important to achieving economic growth in the real world? Is it more or better resources, or is it increase in technology? Well, it turns out that technological advances are far more important. Increases in productivity or technology are responsible in general for roughly 2/3 of the economic growth for the past 60 years. So technological advances are far more important to economic growth than increase in resources in quantity or quality. Not to say that increasing resources in quantity and quality are not important. Of course, they still are responsible for 33% of the economic growth which takes place, which is a big chunk. But we continually need to invent better, more efficient, more modern, more industrialized ways of producing goods and services if we want to continue down the road of economic growth. So here's our original production possibilities curve, A, B, C, D, and E. Let's assume that there's more labor resources available. Or let's assume that labor simply has become more educated. So therefore, they are better equipped to produce goods and services. Let's say we discovered more natural gas or oil. That's exactly what happened in the United States over the last 8 or 10 years with directional drilling or fracking. All right? Let's say that there's some advancement in technology, a new fandangled way to produce goods and services. All of these would help us achieve economic growth. Economic growth means the entire curve shifts. And you can see that economic growth is represented with a rightward shift of the production possibility frontier. We are no longer stuck at A, B, C, D, and E curve. We are now dealing with a new reality of A prime, B prime, C prime, D prime, E prime. That represents economic growth and our new limitations of production. So when a nation decides which particular mix of output, capital goods versus consumer goods, maximizes their happiness or satisfaction, which point on their production possibilities curve is allocatively efficient, this is most definitely a normative decision. It's subjective. Each country will weigh the marginal benefits and marginal cost of producing and consuming each good against the marginal benefits and cost of producing the other good. So, two countries with similar resources, populations, government styles, political situations, trade agreements could choose different points as allocatively efficient. Let's assume we're evaluating the difference between choice C as in cat versus D as in dog as allocatively efficient. In our previous example, the one from the McConnell textbook, C as in cat was determined to be allocatively efficient because the marginal benefits of producing and consuming two units of consumer goods, 2 pizzas, was exactly equal to the marginal cost at that level of output. And therefore, the remaining resources were put to use to produce industrial robots, and 7 were produced in the time frame of the production possibility model. But what if a country had chosen differently? So what if a country does choose D as opposed to C? The economic theory suggests that choosing more capital goods now should produce better economic growth in the future. So if we look at choice C versus choice D, if one country chooses D, they're only producing 4 capital goods and more consumer goods, 3 pizzas. Therefore, choice C, 7 robots, 7 capital goods versus 2 pizzas, 2 consumer goods. C, in theory, should produce better economic growth going forward. Let's look at this concept graphically. Here we have 2 nations side by side. We'll call this nation X, and we'll call this nation Y. If we look at X, their current production possibility frontier, this green curve, they have chosen as allocatively efficient this point on the curve. Now notice this point on the curve is slightly closer to goods for the present, or consumer goods. The trade-off is less goods for the future, or capital goods. Given the same situation, nation Y, they've chosen a different point as allocatively efficient. They've chosen this point on their current curve. Notice slightly more production of capital goods, goods for the future, the trade-off being less goods for the present, consumer goods right now. Be certain both points are on the curve. This is on the curve, this is on the curve. Both are possible points of allocative efficiency for each country. The ramifications of choosing more goods for the present, in theory, is that future economic growth is not quite as strong. We see that nation Y has a production possibility frontier which is shifted further right than nation X. Now, ceteris paribus, other things being equal, this is going to hold true. But we know in the real world that there are other factors to consider besides this one idea. Congratulations, you have finished the Production Possibilities Frontier Production Possibilities Model video. Please feel free to reach out to me via text or email if you need assistance with any concepts related to these economic principles.